Welcome, dear and esteemed viewers, to our program on natural medicine, Topic 10. Today we are very much talking about sports and what energy sports actually deplete within the body, particularly indeed in the area of omega-3s and within the human body. That omega-3 is related to top-level sports, but also to increased consumption, is something we want to explore a bit today. Ultimately, we also want to raise awareness that we should do something beneficial for our athletes, from young athletes to professional athletes, and really consider supplementing with omega-3. We will now discuss this topic with the gentleman, the professor, who is extremely knowledgeable in this area and continuously educates and raises awareness among many medical professionals about omega-3. It is Professor Dr. Clemens von Schacky, who is also here today. Welcome, dear Mr. Clemens.
Thank you much for the invitation.
You're very welcome. So, sports and omega-3 are essentially a unit and should never be missing. Is that correct?
In fact, it is correct. We actually opened up the topic through measurements at the largest German Olympic training center, the Sports Cardiology Department of the Technical University of Munich. In collaboration with the chairholder, we measured German athletes over 100, mainly winter sports athletes, and were very surprised at how low. The omega-3 levels, that is, the levels of EPA and DHA, were in the athletes.
Does that mean excessive sports reduce or consume more omega-3?
And since then, this has been done repeatedly in other contexts. And the picture that has now come together is that the athlete actually burns so many calories that he also burns his omega-3 reserves and thus reaches low levels. No one has no omega-3 reserves. Every person has a minimum of omega-3 reserves.
Where do these minimum omega-3 reserves come from?
They are likely retained in the body. There are mechanisms that retain them, that prevent them from being burned, prevent them from being used otherwise. But athletes are a group that pushes these limits. And it is now known that, for example, the omega-3 index decreases over the season. It is known that athletes lose, and some, even if they supplement, do not really reach adequate levels. And that's why the topic has been addressed, and several studies have been conducted on athletes, including intervention studies and other forms of research, which have brought a lot of insights to light. One insight is the topic of muscle soreness. Who hasn't experienced muscle soreness? With muscle soreness, the muscle is damaged due to excessive exertion. This is identified by the release of the muscle enzyme creatine kinase. The muscle will then swell, and an inflammatory reaction will occur throughout the muscle. During this time, strength is also limited, but it heals after a few days. And the original strength returns, the muscle damage disappears, and the inflammatory reaction also subsides. Several studies have been conducted, and they said, okay, now I'll raise the level. And it has been found in several studies that, firstly, the threshold for muscle damage is higher, significantly higher, which results in less creatine kinase being released, if at all, leading to less swelling, which also results in less inflammation, and consequently, the loss of strength is significantly reduced. This means that if you have an omega-3 index in the target range of 8 to 11%, you will experience less muscle soreness. This has been proven. And this also means that, for example, completely different training regimens are possible because the loss of strength is no longer an issue.
Interesting, it's really.
And this has become somewhat known in the sports world. And that's one of the reasons why athletes are increasingly supplementing themselves and measuring to escape muscle soreness. That's one topic.
But it's also in amateur sports. I went jogging for 10 kilometers yesterday, and this morning, no muscle soreness. I've never experienced that before. I'm now massively supplementing with omega-3.
Yes, it works.
That's simply the reason.
That's the reason. But there are several other reasons. And part of the reasons has to do with the brain. On one hand, we have the issue of brain damage. For example, with soccer players, the ball hitting the head and shaking the brain, or more extreme, with boxers, and also, for example, with football players. That's the most extreme. It's known that the brain of an old football player has damage, significant damage, and these damages are responsible for depression, dementia, and but already at an age, dementia already, at an age that is very young. 40, 50 years old, football players sometimes already are considered old when they have developed dementia. Now it is known, based on the measurements, that higher levels also make the brain so more resistant to damage. This means that neurofilament light, which is a biomarker indicating that brain cells are deteriorating, will rise less after a brain trauma, and the damage the brain suffers will be less pronounced, which then manifests in less dementia and so on. And especially during the active sports career, it also manifests in better brain performance. This can be measured, for example, as we mentioned earlier, as reaction time, which is shorter with a higher omega-3 index. It can be measured in soccer players as effectiveness. That means the ball comes and the ball leaves the player faster. And these soccer players will be more efficient. In addition, the topic of brain trauma is gaining increasing attention. And for example, in the United States, it is prohibited for individuals under 18 to head the ball. And this is, of course, a development that is feared here in Europe, not without reason, because heading the ball can indeed damage the brain. And you can prevent this by maintaining the omega-3 index in the target range of 8 to 11%, so that brain damage does not manifest as much.
The Americans are not progressive in a negative sense everywhere, but here in a positive sense.
And it doesn't stop there. It continues. And what fascinates me is that this more efficient brain also manifests in better coordination skills, which is of great importance for many athletes. And if you put this together, on one hand, you have a muscle that is more resistant, and on the other hand, you have a shorter reaction time and better coordination skills. And I couldn't initially put it together myself, but a team doctor from a football club put it together and said, if that's the case, then athletes who have their omega-3 index in the target range should get injured less often.
And? Is that so, huh?
It is so. And the example is a large German football club that was very successful last year.
Wasn't it Leipzig?
I didn't want to say that.
Yes, they got him up from the third league to the Champions League.
This football club won the cup last season, and the team doctor told me that a key factor was that in the last 2 months of the season, they didn't have a single injured player. And it should be mentioned that they played most of the cup final with only 10 players, not 11. And the team doctor says he put it together, and he says that was the reason why we won the cup. And during the season, a publication was released that clearly shows that the higher the omega, when the omega-3 level is in the target range, the lower the injury frequency among athletes. And in terms of the mechanisms, it's completely clear, but it should be mentioned that this does not come at the expense of the athlete's performance. The performance of athletes is determined by the null cardiopulmonary factors, that is, by the heart and lungs. And regarding the lungs, we know that with higher omega-3 levels, what doctors call the obstructive component, meaning a lung change towards asthma, occurs less frequently. And by the way, this asthmatic reaction is the reason why athletes warm up before going onto the field, because sudden exertion often leads to an asthma-like reaction of the lungs. They call this exercise-induced bronchial constriction.
Also for amateur sports. So jogging is definitely suitable as a warm-up?
Yes. And the reason is that the lungs react in this way, and this reaction is significantly reduced when the omega-3 levels are correct. That's one thing. And the other is that aspects of heart function improve, such as the heart rate decreasing more quickly after exertion. This means the heart recovers faster and is more ready to perform again. And now, initial results are starting to show that overall performance can be enhanced with higher omega-3 levels. However, this still needs to be confirmed. So, for the athlete, it's quite a comprehensive story, but of course, it applies not only to athletes, but to any sports enthusiast, to anyone who relies on their body. And for anyone who relies on their body, it's naturally beneficial if they can depend on it, because they can assume that they won't necessarily get injured during sports and won't sustain damage, or at least have a minimal risk of damage. Yes, that, thank you very much, is similar to pregnancy, where you have, if you will, an extreme situation for the body. And in this extreme situation, the effects of omega-3 fatty acids become more apparent. So let's summarize. In sports, muscles are strengthened. We are less prone to injuries, muscle courses and recovery phases are shortened. We have the cognitive abilities in the brain. We are faster in reaction capability. So basically all attributes that make a good athlete. And ultimately, for the whole team behavior, ultimately the risk of injury is reduced. This involves a lot of money, very often in sports. The brain is protected from impacts. Another question on that, against the following damages. How is it actually with a boxer? Does the trainer teach that? Does he know that his student should definitely aim for this omega-3 level to avoid the risk of early dementia? So let's say the trainers are slowly learning it. There are sports clubs that have been using this concept for a very long time. This includes, for example, Athletic Bilbao. Athletic Bilbao, he has a certain peculiarity. It is located in the Basque country. There are about 1 million Basques, and from this 1 million, Athletic Bilbao consistently develops excellent players. And the business model is that they are then sold to other clubs, and Athletic Bilbao lives off that. But this only works if many players can be drawn from this small population, and they know exactly how to do it. I talked a lot with the team doctor of Athletic Bilbao, and we were completely on the same page. Wow. But this is actually knowledge that shouldn't just be shared in elite sports. It actually concerns all of us. It concerns all of us. There's another aspect to it. This is one of those studies where I said, when it was presented to me, I asked, do you really think this is a successful concept for a study? And that was the idea of whether rotator cuff tears, so severe shoulder injuries, are somehow related to the omega-3 index. I said, exactly. And the result was crystal clear, yes. And it's another tissue that shows it is more stable, more robust, when the omega-3 index in this tissue is correct. And it's another tissue, shoulder, you could also say knee, which will then be less prone to injury. We have now learned at the end of July from a very nice and high-ranking publication that, for example, complaints that the knee joint can cause when it is worn out or when it is affected can be minimized by an omega-3 index in the target range. This related to stiffness, pain, and necessary medication. And then I asked the team doctor from Leipzig if he believes that this also plays a role in connection with the football players. And he said, of course, because naturally the knee joint is a heavily stressed joint in football. And if this joint is more robust, less prone to damage, then the player will be less injured. It is, especially in sports, a nice complete picture, which has developed through the concept, through the measurements where we found that athletes are a group of people with low baseline values. The intervention studies were overall successful because of these low baseline values. A consistent scientific picture has emerged, and it is becoming more and more established that elite athletes, but also recreational athletes, should raise their omega-3 index to the target range to perform better in sports, be more efficient, and avoid injuries.
One important point about Leipzig, I remember, they also conducted a micronutrient analysis, but actually in the reverse order, first raise the omega-3 levels and then replenish the micronutrients. Because you once told me it doesn't work the other way around. And I found that interesting because we take all sorts of supplements nowadays, but if the omega-3 level isn't right, then it doesn't work. The body can't absorb it.
Then the body doesn't absorb it as readily, I would say.
That's a shame for the money, right?
A shame for the money, yes.
You've often mentioned muscles, susceptibility to injuries, but also dementia, brain issues from impacts. And in a side comment outside of our show, you said there are actually two reasons for people to go into a nursing home, either due to frailty, physical nature, and the other is dementia. Yes, but my goodness, we have both things in our own hands.
It is such that it has been found in older people that what is referred to as age-related muscle loss, it's assumed to be a given, that this age-related muscle loss cannot only be slowed down by omega-3 fatty acids, but also reversed.
Indeed.
And this is due to certain changes in protein synthesis in the muscle. This means the muscle maintains itself better. And this leads to longer careers for athletes. Yes, because muscle strength is preserved for a longer time. And additionally, we know from brain studies that what is referred to as age-related brain degeneration is only partially age-related brain degeneration. 2/3 of it is a manifestation of the deficiency of omega-3 fatty acids. And if you now want to avoid, if you put this side by side and ask, what conclusion do I draw from this for my later life? Then you can say, I would like to avoid becoming weak, and I would also like to avoid becoming demented. And these are the two reasons that bring people into nursing homes, because they no longer have the muscle strength and or because they no longer have the mental capacity. And in this way, you can do something good for yourself, in my opinion, by saying, well, I avoid the nursing home as long as possible. There are people who say, well, women, they don't want to have those bat wings, and maintaining muscle mass helps prevent that.
Also?
Yes. That means the body ages differently in terms of shape and muscle structure. And I find that quite fascinating.
Yes, now.
For a cardiologist, body shape is of secondary importance. I am a cardiologist. The heart is vital. Life and death matter more. But other people have different priorities, and those are theirs.
We started talking about sports, and it's clear that it's important for every athlete. And it's also important for us as parents to instill in our children so that they can truly perform optimally, have minimal risk of injury, and ensure that everything up here remains good and healthy and can continue to develop well. In other broadcasts, you mentioned that a high level of 8 to 11% is of great importance for our brain, for academic performance, intelligence, and so on. On the other hand, we no longer have the entire risk of muscular problems and so on. So it is actually an absolute basic medicine within medicine, but also in prevention for every viewer, regardless of the sport.
In sports, it can be learned in an exemplary way because athletes demand their bodies, both physically and mentally, in a special way, and deficiencies manifest there most readily, making them easiest to recognize. But of course, it applies to every individual.
You also mentioned, so you said earlier that you supplemented certain athletes, but the level still dropped.
Yes.
How are you handling it now? Can you maintain it with the athletes?
Through high dosages, yes.
So then you really have to give patato 3-4 grams every day, and then a large part is burned off and some remains, right?
Correct. It's particularly noticeable, not only with soccer players, but also with tennis players who need a high level of mental performance on the court, because tennis requires a high degree of coordination and so on. And then you see how a tennis player develops. That's, I can't name any names right now, but
there are such cases, huh?
There are such cases.
Some come and stay, and others come and leave right away.
Exactly. And many don't even come at all. Because they train so much and burn so many calories and substitute too little. And therefore, their possibilities are limited.
And then comes the injury and it's all over. Incredibly significant. Again, this show, dear Clemens, can that just briefly?
It's so exemplary, and you can learn a lot from it, for everyone else too.
That we think so little about omega-3 is simply also because everyone is shouting that a balanced diet includes everything and that supplementing is completely unnecessary. That's what it says on Wikipedia. I even read it again today. So, complete nonsense. I also had my micronutrients measured, even though I eat a balanced diet and mostly Demeter and organic food, just deficiencies everywhere without end. So these are just facts from measuring, but that's just how it is.
So, of course, the nutrition researchers are misleading us a bit because they always talk about a balanced diet, but no one knows what a balanced diet is.
Yes.
And if I don't define it, I can't really talk about it if I don't even know what it is. Also, if I, as a scientist, don't know what I'm researching, then I can't produce reliable results. I'm just groping in the dark.
Well.
And then to go and say that if it's a balanced diet, there can't be any deficiency, is rather absurd.
Which you've repeatedly said that the value of 8 to 11% is what we need to have, because that's also what's present in a fetus during pregnancy, what the baby has during breastfeeding. That's the 8 to 11%.
If the mother can provide it, yes.
If she can provide it during this depletion, that means we should also aim for 8 to 11. How do I know that I have 8 to 11?
That can only be determined through measuring, thus through standardized measuring. And for that, you can either have blood drawn by a doctor, who will then send it to Omega Metrics or another lab that measures the HS omega-3 index.
Okay, so I have to go to the doctor and say, I want to know the HS omega-3 value.
Know the HS omega-3 index, or you can do a self-test like the one I brought with me. And without standardized measurements, the values have no relation to the scientific data. And the scientific data represent the basis and the value of these measurements.
Mm-hmm. May I ask, how many studies have you already participated in regarding omega-3?
Oh, I can't keep track of that anymore. We have nearly 400 publications based on our measurement method. And that's why we know very precisely what the measurement results mean and what they are significant for. And what always amazes us is the breadth of topics. It ranges from heart to brain to topics that I would never have thought of myself. And everywhere it turns out that the composition of the cell membrane, that the fatty acids in the cell membrane determine health, and in particular its EPA and DHA, the essential omega-3 fatty acids.
You know, what I would wish for is that every pharmacy would give every bastard who comes in briefly an omega-3 test.
That would be nice. It's a vision for the future, but...
Yes, but the ultimate prevention, that's where I benefit the most. I mean, they do the test, say, okay, it's too low. Then you can immediately buy the bottles or the products you need. It's already in the right place again. So it would actually be a well-rounded thing. The healthcare system will be massively relieved. The risk that any of our viewers will end up in a nursing home will be reduced by another 60-70% through muscle strength and dementia probability. I mean, where else?
We're not there yet, but that's where we want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And
so any pharmacist watching right now can contact you.
Gladly. And
that's the innovation.
We have the data, and we also have the awareness. Among people out there, 80% know that omega-3 fatty acids are good for the heart and brain. Mm-hmm. 80%. But this knowledge is not being applied. Mm-hmm. And to apply this knowledge, I think a measurement would be suitable to show someone where they stand and whether they need supplementation or not.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. What I also notice in our shows when you speak, it's razor sharp formulation. Thank you very much. Dear Clemens von Schacky, that was for you, dear viewers. And we have gone far beyond the topic of sports, but I am quite sure that everyone who listened attentively now also understood what it's about. In this sense, all the best until next time, and goodbye, everyone.